All right, so let's talk about React components. So far, what we've seen is just components, but based on the function structure. Yeah, we showed on the last week, we believe, how to create a movie component. Yeah, you remember, we created a function, we pass some props, and we display the title, the year, whatever. Yeah, something fairly simple. Today, I would like to go one step beyond. I would like to start thinking about user interaction. I want to create a component with a button. So every time I click on the button, I would like to increase the counter. How many times the user has clicked on a button? Something like that. Something simple, but I hope you appreciate the difference. So far, we got static components. We display something, and it never changes. But now we're going to have dynamic components. The user interface will react to the user interaction. Yeah, that's pretty much the idea. So the first thing we should consider is, I'm not going to use a function. I'm not going to use a function because historically speaking, function components did not support stateful, did not support dynamism. Yeah? Historically speaking, function components were completely static. That has changed over the last months, but we'll do a different workshop. Yeah? The keyword here is hooks. So hooks have changed the way you call with React, but that's for a different session. Yeah? First of all, I want to explain the fundamentals about how to create interaction with our component. So, first things first, let's create a stateful component. So, imagine that I want to, once again, create a button, and I want to click on the button and something like that. Yeah? So the way we will create a stateful component, rather than typing function, we need to create a class. If you have played a bit with some backend technologies like Java or C#, I'm sure you're familiar with classes. If not, a class is some sort of object, JavaScript object. Yeah? JavaScript object can have methods, can have properties, just to simplify a lot of what a class is. So next thing is obviously the name of the class. So let me call it something like my button, or no, let me rename it to click counter. Yeah, I want to know how many times the user has clicked on a button. And now the next keyword is very important. You need to type extends react.component. So with that keyword, extends react.component, you're essentially telling JavaScript that class is a React component. Okay? This is a convention. On the last week of the bootcamp, on the penultimate week of the bootcamp, week number 7, we'll talk about prototype and inheritance. So we'll talk a bit more about what happened when you do that in JavaScript. But for now, that's all we need. And then what? Let's display something static, just to feel comfortable with the syntax. So the minimum requirement when you create a class component is to create a method. Look at the syntax, guys. This is what we call a class method, a method called render. And that render method will return a piece of HTML, like hello. Yep, that's it. So can anybody figure out how can I display that message on the screen?
You have to call your class click counter in the app.
Correct. How we do that?
So I guess just anywhere in between the divs.
Yep, just a new tag, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we showed that last week when talking about how to create a component. That's it. So if we do that, we back up to the browser, you see? You got the message. So,
What's the meaning of stateful?
Stateful means it holds a state. State is data that is likely to change. And whenever the data changes, the component will re-render. This is what we will see today. Okay? Stateful components means it holds a state. There is data that is likely to change at some point. So, yeah, that's the first step. Obviously, if that's what we wanted to do, to me that will feel a bit stupid. If we imagine that we just wanted to display a message, hello stateful component, if that will be the message, what I will do is I will create just a function. You see? This is the equivalent version of the class. I hope you agree with me that syntax is just much simpler. Yeah, you create a function, you return a div. So this generates the same result. However, the reason why we create a class is not just to display something static, it's because we want to hold the state. And how do we do that? That's very important. Let's introduce a state. So when you create a class, and that has nothing to do with React, not even with JavaScript. So that's a basic principle in software programming. When you create a class, you can initialize, you can set up the component by typing constructor. That's a keyword. That's a keyword. And once you go to constructor, there is something else you need to know here. There is a keyword, there is a method you always have to call, and this is called super. We'll see in week number 7 what the hell super is. For now, just remember you have to write this code structure. So this is to keep it all oversimplified. This is sending a message to React like, hey, I'm a new component, please do whatever you need to do to make sure I work as expected. Yeah? That's a super high-level description of what super does. And now, this is the important part. Now we can create a variable with the state. Something like that. This .state, you will see I refer many times to the keyword this. Yeah? Long term is something challenging to deal with. And this is one of the reasons why the way strong developers are coding with React is quickly changing. But historically speaking, that's the way you initialize the state. You do something like that. This .state equals whatever. That's your state. In my case, that's an object. It's generally speaking, but not necessarily an object. So here, I can just set up whatever I want. So for instance, let's start simple. Message, and then hello Tuesday. You see, my state is an object containing a single property message with just a string, hello Tuesday. So how can I then display the message? Can anybody figure out how can I display the hello Tuesday message from the state of the render method? Sorry, Minji? Click counter dot state.
No, this state of message.
Okay, wait a minute. So click counter dot state. Not quite, right? Ebrima, he said something. Can you repeat that?
State, you have to put in brackets.
Brackets. State this.
No,
No. This dot state dot message. Ebrima is right. You see, the way you refer to the state is because, first of all, that's a JavaScript object. It's JavaScript data. So first things first, you have to surround it with curly braces. Remember that, Minji? Cool. And then, yeah, that's an object, this state.message. So this dot state.message. Easy peasy. Yeah. Any questions? So far, still, using a stateful component feels stupid to me because the component is still static. I'm not interacting. My user interface is not changing depending on anything. Yeah? Something super simple. But now, let's add some complexity. Let me add a new method. There is another absolutely vital method when talking about stateful components called component did mount. Component did mount means React will render the message, and then once the message has been displayed, it will call that method. So I can do whatever I want. For instance, do you know how to delay an action in JavaScript? I want to trigger an action after 2 seconds, for instance. Say it again? Callback? No, wrong. Set timeout. Fantastic, guys. Set timeout. It receives a callback function. We'll talk about callback function in a couple of weeks' time. But the syntax is something like that. Okay? Set timeout. So that function will be executed only after 3000 milliseconds. That's the syntax on set timeout. So here, I can do whatever I want. So for instance, I can use an alert and display something like, congratulations, you are visitor 1 million. You know these weird pop-ups you get sometimes in some websites when you are watching Game of Thrones, not following any legal channel, yeah? You see? So let me refresh the page. Nothing, and after 3 seconds, pop. Yeah? So that's the way the component did mount method. It's very important, and that's a classic question in a job interview. Can you tell me what's the execution order? They may present you something like that, and they want you to point with your finger to where the code is at every stage of the journey. So to prove that, I'm going to add some breakpoints using DevTools. You already know how to enable DevTools. Right-click, inspect. And now, you go to sources. You remember over the last few days, we've been playing a bit with DevTools. I think on the intro to JavaScript session, we play a bit with creating some algorithms. But the beautifulness about DevTools is you can also interact with your React application. And how we do that? If you press Command P on Mac or Control P on Windows, or you go to page and you navigate, that's sometimes a bit harder to do. I personally prefer to use the shortcut. Command P on Mac, Control P on Windows, then you can search file names. For instance, app.javascript. And then, boom, surprise. I got my React components displayed here. So I can interact with them. So look, I'm going to add a breakpoint on line number 8, line number 12, 13, and 18. After refreshing the page, in theory, Google Chrome will stop on the highlighted lines. Let me remark in theory, Google Chrome fails a lot. If it fails, we'll see how to play with it, because I got some techniques after years of fight with Google Chrome. I got some techniques to force the browser to listen to me. Okay? But let's be polite. First things first. Yeah? First things first. Cool. So now my obvious question is, can anybody tell me what's going to be the execution order? So, Minji, I just want numbers, please. Numbers. You got 8, 12, 13, and 18. So I want you to tell me numbers. 12, and then what?
Oh, no. 18.
18.
18, 12, 8, 13.
18, 12, 8, 13. All right? Prima? 12, 13.
8,
All right. I'm not saying you are right or wrong. I just want to listen to your thoughts. So Daniel,
18,
18, 8, 12, 13, and Adam,
12, 18, 8, 13.
12, 18, 8, 13. Ian,
8, 18, 13.
and finally Panos.
12, 8, 18, 13.
That's interesting. So you all said different things, right? No one repeat, actually, I think. That's interesting. That's interesting. I think you've covered all the options, right? So even if it's just by accident, someone got it right. Well, one person got the job. Only, obviously, one of you is right, but it's good. Someone is right at least, that's correct. Does anybody wants to change based on what everybody else has said? Anyone will say, no, I want to change my mind and I want to support Esteban, whoever. Yeah? No one? You still believe you're right? Okay, cool. So,
I think I want to change.
so Minji wants to change. All right, Minji. So who are you supporting? Or you want to set something completely different?
Wait. I'm gonna say it and let's see if it
Okay,
works.
let's leave it like that. Okay? We came here to play, you know, these things that. Okay, cool. So, yeah, the thing is, the only person who managed to give a good answer is Ian. Yeah. So everyone was massively wrong, and that's good. That's good because I mean, no one was expected to give me the right answer. But two things. First of all, it's absolutely fine not to be able to solve the problem. At the same time, it's very important to understand it after this session. Yeah? So if you are in a job interview and you start saying that the first line is 12, 18, immediately you are out. The thing is, it doesn't really matter what else happens during that session with HR, you'll never get that job. Yeah? Because that proves the most fundamentals about coding. So why Ian is right? Because first of all, guys, when you create a class, the constructor, that's the first method. That's the first thing. Yeah? And once again, that has nothing to do with React, with components, with JavaScript, the software. Speaking. The constructor, that's the first thing. So first things first. We set up the constructor, line number 8. Then, what's next? And that's the tricky part. That's the tricky part. Is it component did mount or is it render? Which method runs first, guys? The render, that's correct. Look at the semantics. Component did mount in the past. That means the component is mounted already, is rendered. So after line number 8, the code will jump straight to line number 18, and it will display the message. Then, once the component has been rendered by the first time, actually, I'll tell you something. Even though I said Ian is right, he's not really right, but he was very close to be right. Yeah. Say it again. The last
lines.
No. So the order is correct, but it's not completed. All right. Oh, sorry. Ignore me. Yeah, ignore me. Let's assume the solution is right. I don't want to make it more complicated than it is. So let me start again. Line number 8, we set up the component. Then line number 18. Then line number 12. Yeah. And then after 3 seconds, line number 13. Yeah? So let's leave it like that to simplify things a bit. Let's run it to see if actually I'm right or not. So once again, if it doesn't work, I will become more aggressive with my techniques towards debugging. Yeah. So if I refresh, it works. Oh, so we got lucky enough. You see, line number 8, that's the first one. So according to Ian, now we should jump straight to line number 18. There you go. You see? Now we should jump to line number 12. Fantastic. And now, once I click the blue button, nothing will happen for 3 seconds. Yeah? Look, 1, 2, 2.5, and 3. Yeah? and then you will get the alert. Yeah? So that's vital. That's very important, guys, to understand the life cycle of your React application. First the constructor, then the render, and then the component map. So now my next question is, imagine that, and actually I'm introducing task number 13 or something like that, or 14, 12, one of these tasks in conflicts. Imagine that after 3 seconds, rather than showing an ugly alert message to the user, we just want to update the message. We want to display hello Tuesday to hello, I don't know, whatever, coronavirus, yeah, I don't care. We want to update the message after 3 seconds, yeah? So can anybody figure out how can I do that?
You do this state, this dot state equals curly braces, and then a message, a new message.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Let's have a look. So back to my web browser. Let me remove the breakpoints, right? We don't care about them anymore, at least not for now. So, hello Tuesday. 1 second, 2 seconds. I think we got 3 seconds already, right? It's not happening. It's not happening. Is it because my code is not landing on line number 13? I don't know. Let's refresh the page. 1 second, 2 seconds. So definitely you are running that line of code. However, nothing really changes.
Maybe it's this dot state dot message.
Okay. One thing at a time, guys. So the next way of dealing with the problem will be this dot state dot message equals hello Adam. Yeah, something like that. Ebrima is not happy about that, but let's go one step at a time, Ebrima, please. So now, you see, we stop here. Will the message be updated or not? No. And the reason is, unfortunately, that's not the way React works. You cannot change your state like that. Because if you do that, React won't be aware of the change. And if React is not aware of any change on your state, the consequence is React is not going to re-render. The idea is we need to tell React, hey, I want to change my state. Here is the new data. And then React will say, okay, because you want to update your state, I will force a new render. I will call the render method again. Thanks to the new render cycle, the component will be updated, visually speaking. And as Ebrima said, the way to update the state is not like that. It's not like that. Is by doing this .set state, which is a method. It's a method, so we're asking React, hey, please update the state. And now, on the argument of the method, we pass an object with the properties that we want to update. In this particular case, something like that. That's the correct way to update the state used on React. So if I remove the breakpoints, now you see, after 3 seconds, let's start again. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now our component is reacting to our changes. Let me add some breakpoints. You see my breakpoints? 8, 12, 15, and 20. So there is 1 point on the board challenge for this week to whoever gives me the right answer. What happened when I refresh the page? Breakpoints. One and a half points. Panos? Say again?
Hello Tuesday, is that what it's saying?
How long?
Hello? Hello?
No, listen, I just understand numbers.
Okay, number
8,
eight.
and then what?
Number 20.
Number what? 20?
20, yeah.
Yep.
Number 12, number 12 and 15.
12 and 15, right? Okay, let's leave it there. Adam,
The same, but then add a 20 on the end.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Ebrima, Minji, Ian. Same as Panos, okay? Interesting. So 2 versus 2, right?
I agree with Adam.
You agree with Panos?
No, Adam.
With Adam?
I actually agree with Adam too.
You cannot change your mind. Too late. Sorry, guys. And Ian, which team are you supporting? Adam? And now Panos is leaving the ball, right? Rima?
So let's just see. Oh, I thought. I'll join that and the rest
As well.
Yeah, I'll straight.
So, yeah, unsurprisingly, this team wins, right? It's fantastic because at least Ebrima is wrong, but it's not as wrong as he was 4 minutes ago, thinking that the first line will be 20 or whatever. Yeah? So it's closer to be fully correct, and that's really good. Let's run it. If I refresh the page, line number 8 first, yeah, I think that doesn't surprise anybody anymore. And now we render by the first time, 20, fantastic. Then component did mount, 12. After 3 seconds, it will stop on 15. Oh. Yeah. And now that's the important part. Because we're calling set state, we are asking React, hey, the state is changing. In other words, I want to refresh my user interface because the state is associated to the UI. State means I want to change the UI. I want to display a new message. So to display a new message, React has to re-render. That's the key point. Yeah? Every time you call set state, React will re-render. Any questions?
You win 1.5 points then. You win 1.5 points.
No, just Adam, because he was the first time to give the right answer. Yeah? Cool. Any question, guys? No? Okay, so let's do the last exercise of the day. I told you before that in reality, what I wanted was to add a button. Yeah? So let's add a button on the UI. So I want to change my component actually a lot because I don't want to display a message. I want to check counter. So how many times you click on the button? By default, counter with 1 R only, yeah? 0 times. Every time you click on the button, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, yeah? So let me build a render method. You know what I do when I got a multi-line return statement in React, I put the parentheses. I find that easier to read, personally, see? So now I can display number of times, let me add a div, number of times, or actually click counter, let's keep it easy, yeah? Click counter, thing is easy to understand, and then H1, and how, guys, how can we display now the click counter? Correct, this is the stateful counter, fantastic. Yeah? So 0. And surprisingly, that's good. Yeah. Now I want to have a button here. So every time I click on the button, the counter gets increased. Something like that. So let's add a button. Good. And on the button, click or click me. And now that's the tricky part, guys. I want to bind with the click event. To do that, first of all, the easy part is you need to do that on click. On click means whenever the user clicks on the button, you do something. And this is where people get confused. This is one of the reasons why people is using classes less and less. Now is where you are likely to fail at some point in your life. First of all, we need to create a method. A method like increase counter. Yeah? That's the easy part. So now, imagine that we are not calling the method yet. We'll call it in like a couple of minutes. But imagine that we're calling it already. How can I update the state?
Return.
Return, wrong. I don't want to return anything. How did we update the state in the previous example? Correct, Ian. This dot set state. And then what else? Yeah, because that's a method. Correct, panels. And then what? Counter plus plus.
We need to create a function.
We need to create, not necessarily.
Let's create a thing called not control.
Callback function? Colon? Okay, colon. Fantastic. So that's correct, Evrima. So Evrima wants to set a new counter. And what's the value? Counter plus plus. What will that return, guys? Eventually, that will throw an error, Evrima. What's the value of the variable counter? Wrong. You don't have any variable called counter. That's why that will throw an error, or not a number, or something like that. How do I access the previous value of the counter?
You can sign.
Oh, wait a minute. Minji said something interesting. This dot counter.
This dot state.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. To be more precise, we'll talk about that probably next month. So you should do that, which looks like the same, but it's not exactly the same. Yeah? You said, hey, the new counter is whatever the previous counter was plus 1. Yeah? That's it. That's the way you update the state. So now the question is, how do we call the increase counter? That's the difficult part, guys. That's the difficult part. So, can I do that? Can anybody tell me what this algorithm will return?
Do you even need that list?
You what?
Do you need this dot? Is this dot needed where on the
So you want to get rid of this dot, like that? Yes, it is needed. Without it, it will try to find a global function called increase counter. So whenever you create a class function like increase counter, you have to reference to it with a this dot. So you definitely need it. But that doesn't mean the rest of the code is correct, unfortunately.
So by using this, we're only looking within that block,
Correct, within that class.
in that class.
Yeah? That's the way you keep your logic encapsulated. but that won't work. And that will, I believe, that will throw an error. We are creating an infinite loop. We are destroying our laptops now. Here you go. Maximum update depth exceeded. This can happen when a component repeatedly calls set state. Yes. Why the hell?
So you should set where the counter should stop?
No,
Or not?
no. The thing is, I'm not even trying to click on the button. I'm just trying to refresh the page, yeah? So, you know, the thing is, that line of code shouldn't even run. But the thing is, it's running infinitely. And that's dangerous. Why this is happening? React will initialize the constructor, fine. It will call render, fine. But then look, what happens when you use the parentheses, when you open and close parentheses? The function is called immediately. So line number 12 will run. And then what? We change the state. What happens when you change the state? Render again. No problem at all. We go to render method. So once again, we got the same problem. We are calling the function immediately. So we go back to increase counter method and we change the state and we come back here. You see the ping pong between these two methods? That's why it creates an infinite loop. So that's completely wrong because we don't really want to call the method immediately. We want to call the method when we click on the button, not before. There are different ways to solve the problem. I don't like the majority of them. But let me show you a couple of alternatives. The first one is on the on-click button, you declare a function. And only when the function has been clicked, then you call our method. Yeah? That's a convention, so you just have to get used to it. If we run it, it works. Yeah? I'm going to present you different ways of solving the binding problem, which is a pain in the ass. Regardless of what your favorite is, eventually you'll keep disliking, you'll continue hating classes. But doesn't matter. For the short term, let's find alternatives. And then you choose your favorite. Can you do that? You see, I just remove the parentheses. That won't work neither. Because if you do that, unfortunately, you are changing the value of lexical dis. Lexical dis is the most complicated part of JavaScript. This will be the main focus on week number 8 of the bootcamp. So I'm not going to explain the reasoning behind. However, just let you know, that won't work. You cannot do that. You may come across some people on Google doing that. Adding .bind this, what the hell that means. Yeah, once again, I'm not going to explain that now, but if you ever do that, you're fixing the problem. So you got two options. Yeah? Either you add .bind this, solves the problem. Again, I'm not asking you to understand. I'm not even going to explain why now. Option B, doing that, which I find slightly more natural.
What is Airbnb using?
Say again?
What's Airbnb using?
Airbnb.
Yeah, the style guide we kind of referred to.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if they go that far explaining. I don't know, Panos. Let me show you, however, a third and, to me, slightly better way of dealing with the problem. I told you before that that syntax is not correct. Yeah? It should be correct, but it's not correct. However, there is a trick. Only if the company is supporting modern browsers, because that's a very new thing in JavaScript, which is to transform that class. And guys, don't ask me any questions here. I'm not going to explain why. Yeah, that's just week number 8 because it's complicated. We need 2-3 hours to explain that. Yeah, I'm just trying I'm just asking you to remember how to solve it, even if you don't understand why. So the last way, the most recent one, and to me the preferred one, if I have to use a class, the preferred one is to change the syntax a bit here. Instead of creating a function like that, you can do that. Sorry, equals. If you do that syntax, if you follow that syntax, then the problem is solved, as you can see here. Okay? So I show you 3 methods. Feel free to use your favorite. If you want my suggestion, either that method or the one I showed first, that was by adding a method like that. These are my favorite ones.
The first and last, yeah?
Second?
The first and last we showed.
The first and last, correct. In other words, try to avoid using .bind this. Because if you do that, the employer will ask you why you do that. And then essentially they will be proving how good you are dealing with lexical this, which may be the case on week number 8, but still many developers struggle to explain that. So I'm trying to not to enter the bizarre world of the lexical this. I'm trying to use something different. Okay? So yeah, these are the different techniques towards binding a button with a method. And that's the way you can, increase the value of a number. Of course, we could have another button. That's the last thing of this workshop. We can have another one. So we can have a button to add or increase, yeah? And then we can have another button called decrease. Yeah. So then what? Obviously, if I run it, will it work as expected? What will be the value if I click on decrease? 2. It should be 0, right? So that's not correct. However, we can solve the problem in many different ways. We can, for instance, create a new method. Yeah. Remove 1. And then we can call it. That will be okay. So now 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, minus 1. Yeah. So that's okay. Oh, but however, personally, I couldn't do that. The reason is, look, you got 2 methods that are literally the same, copy and paste. The only difference is the math operation we apply, either +1 or -1. So why don't we rename the method to maybe update counter? So we call it twice, same method, and here we specify the delta. Yeah, add 1, remove 1. So can anybody tell me what else do I need to do to complete this exercise, Adam?
In the brackets, so update counter.
In the brackets of the counter, here's the bracket.
The arguments, so
Parentheses, you mean?
and then parentheses.
Yeah.
Maybe put the value.
Value. And then what?
And then after this.state.counter,
Yeah.
remove the +1.
Yeah.
And then instead do plus value.
That makes sense to me, guys. Yeah, that's correct, Adam. So if we run it, correct. So now, how do you agree with me? The code looks slightly simpler because we've got one method to run your math operations. Yeah? Any questions?
Could you send snippets on?
Yes, I'll send it on the Slack.
Please?
Anything else, guys? No? Cool, very important. My suggestion is either as part of Codeflix or create a new project. Yeah, I recommend you to have a side project. You create React app and then the name of the project, testing or playground, whatever, to play with these algorithms because I think that's very, 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 very important. Yeah, state. In a couple of weeks' time, we'll see a different way to solve the same problem. But that's important. That's important. Thank you, guys.